Hola, hola, welcome back. If you are just now jumping in here, we've started looking over the irregular verbs in the present tense. So we've gone over the go verbs, and that has been it so far. Now we're going to talk about the one, the only shoe verb. I shouldn't say the one, the only. If it was one shoe verb, it wouldn't be a big deal, but there are quite a few shoe verbs in the Spanish language. Fortunately, though, there is a little bit of a pattern. You might see these called boot verbs someplace, or in more like professional style books, they'll be called stem changing verbs. All right, so what does this mean, or why, or how? Why is it called a shoe verb in the first place? So here's our table with the first person singular, first person plural, second person singular. We have gone over that, and again, if this does not look familiar to you, go back a few videos and click that. I think it's called like the first lesson or something. The reason this is called a shoe verb, though, is because we're only going to change the stem in the area I'm just now drawing here. It looks like a shoe or a boot. That's why they're called shoe verbs or boot verbs, or in Spanish, los verbos de zapato. All right, so they look like that. That's why we call it the shoe verb. So what in the world is a stem? All right, so the first part of the verb, any verb that we use, is called the stem. So whenever we are conjugating, if you watch the present tense video, when you conjugate, you take that ending, you take the AR, the ER, or the IR off of the end of the verb, and what you are left with is the stem. That's the part we put in every one of the boxes, and then you fill in the endings, right? So for example, here we have hablar. It's an AR ending, and what you're left with, if you take that off, or once you take that off, is able. We put the able in every single one of the boxes. So when you have the little box, and I want to say the ending here is O, and then we have as, and then a, amos, etc. Able goes in every single one. That stem is repeated throughout. Now, this is where we go different with the shoe verbs because we change, right? So we look back at that slide before, if you want to review or go back a little bit, it's only going to change inside of the shoe. These two sections right here don't change in the stem. All right, so what does that look like? Well, we have a few examples here. There are three specific times you consistently see that we have some changing. The first is an OTUE. Our example here is dormir, to sleep. Take a look at what is inside of this shoe verb. All right, so here's our shoe. It's a real wonky looking shoe, but there it is, all right? We've changed the O to a UE inside the shoe. Duermo, duermes, duerme, duermen. Outside of the shoe, over here, the O stays there. It doesn't change to a UE, it just stays an O. So we have dormimos y dormís, all right? What you should hopefully recognize here is that the endings don't change. The endings stay the same. We have duermo, duermes, duerme, dormimos, dormís, y duermen, just like you would for any other IR verb. It's going to be the same throughout, okay? So for querer, to want, and pedir, to ask, the endings stay the same as they normally would. It's just changing in the stem, or that first part of the verb, all right? So we have the OTUE. We also have E to IE. We see this in verbs like querer, to want, or pensar, to think. All right? So in here with querer, we have inside of the shoe verb, quiero, quieres, quiere. Outside, queremos, queréis. And then back into the shoe, quieren. So I want, you want, he, she, it wants, we want, y'all want, and they want. All right, so don't forget how this breaks down and what they each mean. Finally, we have an E to I. All right, so this is exemplified in the word pedir, to ask. Okay, so we see inside of our shoe, hopefully you can draw it with your mind by now, but inside of the shoe we have pido, pides, pide, and piden. Outside the shoe we have pedimos y pedís. Notice how they don't change. Also, side note, U to UE can also change. This isn't seen very often. All I could think about when I did this was jugar. If y'all find things that also change from U to UE, let me know because I'm trying to form a good list of them But at the moment, all I have really been able to think of is jugар, to play. And that obviously, you should be able to do it the same way. If you don't, take a moment, just kind of write out your chart and see if you can do this on your own. How would you change jugar? Because it's a shoe verb, you're taking the U and you're changing the U to a UE, or you're adding an E if you want to think of it that way. Go ahead and try that on your own. And hopefully you should be able to do it by now looking at what we have above where we have the shoe. And yes, I know the shoes look real weird, but they're just, he's got big ankles, okay? It happens. Okay, so how will you know? The short answer is you don't. Unfortunately, unlike with William in A Knight's Tale, you cannot just follow your feet. Um, you have to memorize this. All right, I can tell you from experience as a person who has spoken Spanish for many years, you get to a point where it sounds weird if you don't say a shoe verb. You'll say it and you'll be like, that must be a shoe verb because what I just said sounds wrong. All right, you get used to it. You get used to how it should sound, how Spanish should sound. But until that point, you don't know, you have to memorize it. If you're in my class, I will tell you. When we have a new verb, I will say, hey, this is a shoe verb. It's going to go from E to an IE, or it's going to go from E to an I, O to U. I will tell you when we introduce the verb. That way, you're not drowning and trying to figure out if it should be a verb, shoe verb, or not. If you're writing something and you don't know, of course, go with your gut, all right? Sometimes, like in Google Docs, I know it will correct you. But go with your gut on those, and you can't go wrong with that. If you're in my class, you can't go wrong with doing your best guess with what you know, the information you know. All right. So don't forget to be checking to see what activity that you have, and to make sure you have all these notes written down for me and all ready. All right. I'll see you in the next video.